Yeah. Good evening. This is the planning board meeting of October 20th. It's just after 5 p.m. This meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with the state open meeting law pursuant to chapter 107 of the Act of 2022. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. Additionally, all votes taken by the planning board during this and future remote meetings will be by roll call vote. And I'll turn it over to the vice chairman, Hank McCarl, to introduce members and staff and proceed with the meeting.
Thank you very much, Greg. Rick will be hopefully joining us a little later. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and we'll introduce the other members. Jane Remsen, Sean Henry, Beverly Bookin, Rick's not with us, David Rosen, Doug Cook, Gemma, our staff planner, and Craig, our staff, our planning director. It's a pleasure to be here, and I will, I guess if we can review the minutes, would that be appropriate?
Yep.
Okay, doke. Maybe you could maybe throw up a, I don't know, maybe throw up an agenda first. That's what we had up, right?
Yep.
Okay, let's go ahead and let's ask. Okay, this is okay. This is our that's today's meeting. Very good. So let's review the minutes from the September 16th, 2021 meeting and October 6th. Unless you want to put it off until the end. What?
No, I think we could take care of that now. If Gemma, do you have those to put up?
Yeah. Put the first one up and see if we have any comments or corrections. Has everybody had an opportunity to look over the minutes? This is the September 16th, 2021 meeting. Anybody have any additions or corrections to that particular text at this time?
Yes, I questioned Chris McCarthy's comment under number 2.
Okay.
I feel like I remember he speaking consistently in favor of the amendment, so it sort of surprised me to see that he spoke against, and I just wanted to make sure that was correct.
That's my recollection also, that Chris was
So it
in
wasn't
favor of the
speaking in-
conversion.
It was speaking in favor. Can we make that correction in the minutes?
Well, I think, yeah, or maybe it's worth Catherine just double checking the recording, because I could be, we could be wrong. It's over a year ago, but
Okay.
that is my memory.
Yeah,
Well-
I think my recollection, and again, we have the miracle of the video, but I think he may have been talking about the 3 family special permits, retaining 3 family special permits, but was in support of the 2 family by right. But we can definitely go back and verify and clarify that point.
Should we hold off on approval of this until you do that? Or
I
just-
mean, I think with that noted, we'll just make sure that it's accurate one way or the other, but I think we can capture that.
Could I have a motion to approve with the condition that they be corrected?
Yeah, I have one more quick comment though,
ahead,
which I made Catherine on the Google Doc that you sent me, but at the top of the page there, it's missing a word. It says, Mr. McNiff states that he is willing to post a bond. It's missing a word, or yeah. You're missing an A between post and bond right there.
Relative.
Oh, also missing 2, willing to post a bond.
Okay. Minor correction, but that can be noted. Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve with the suggested,
Yeah, I motion that we approve the September 16, 2020 minutes as amended at the meeting.
is there a second?
Second,
Was that Beverly?
yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, Beverly. Okay, any further discussion on those minutes? Okay, all those in favor signify by I will do a roll call vote. Gemma, you want to run the roll call? Or you want me to run the roll call? I can do it either way.
I don't mind.
Okay, thank you.
Member Cook,
Yes.
Member Remsen,
Yes.
Member Bookin,
Yes,
Member McCarl,
Yes,
and Member Henry.
Yes.
thank you very much. Throw the next one up, which was the last meeting that we had. Maybe not. But which one is it, Greg? You got it up there?
There we go.
Okay, very good. This is October 6th, so it is our last meeting. Anybody have any comments, corrections, or comments on this particular on this meeting? Hearing none, I'll be happy to take a motion for approval as presented.
Yep, I move that we approve the October 6, 2022 minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
That was
Doug.
Doug. Thank you, Doug. Okay. With no further comments, Gemma, would you do a roll call for us, please?
Member Cook,
Yes.
Member Remsen,
Yes.
Member Bookin,
Yes.
Member McCarl,
Yes,
and Member Henry.
Yes.
thank you very much. Okay, throw the agenda up again, Greg, please.
Mhm.
Okay, the next the next item is a comprehensive permit review, a review of applications submitted by Seaside Legal Solutions representing William Wheat for a 40B comprehensive permit at 50R Maplewood Avenue, map 24, lot 3.
So I just wanted to begin by saying that yeah, you were forwarded these application materials actually probably in advance of the last meeting. The planning board doesn't have any review authority in terms of or statutory authority or permitting authority as this was filed as a comprehensive permit. But it is referred to all boards, committees, and commissions that might have had some jurisdiction over the project should it have been filed under a permitting avenue under the zoning ordinance that you would be either a site plan review authority or potentially as a major project reviewer on behalf of the city council. So it is forwarded to boards, committees, commissions if they choose to provide comment. There's no rush to do that at this point, but I also wanted to note because procedurally there's no requirement of the applicant to make a presentation to all the boards. That's kind of the whole point. You go to one and it's just the Zoning Board of Appeals to review the comprehensive permit. But Joel Favazza is in the audience as an attendee. And if the chair or vice chair chooses to do so, we can allow him to speak if he wants to speak on the application that he's filed on behalf of his client.
I think it would be appropriate, and then if there are comments, they can follow what
Okay.
Joel has to say. Thank you.
Okay, I will allow him to speak. Oh, sorry.
Can I make a comment on what you just said, Greg, though? I read chapter 40B and it says that in making the zoning board of appeals, blah, 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 in making its decision, shall take into consideration the recommendations of local boards. So
Yeah.
don't we get to make a
You
recommendation?
absolutely can. You don't have to, but you can. Absolutely.
Thank
yep.
you.
If Joel could make a brief
Yep.
comment, that would be good.
Be able to speak, Joel?
Sure, that's great. For the record, Joel Pavazza, Seaside Legal Solutions, 123 Main Street in Gloucester. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of William Wheat, the owner of 50R Maplewood Avenue. It's up to the chair how we'd like to proceed. If you want to promote your panelists, I'm happy to share a few slides and just kind of talk the planning board through what we're looking to do. Otherwise, I mean, I guess you are free to digest it independently on your own, but I'm happy to kind of walk through the big picture of it. If I can get panelist promotion.
Joel, I believe that we saw the original plan on this thing at some point before it went over to 40B status, I believe.
You saw a few iterations, yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think that probably one of our major questions is it is on a very difficult lot, very narrow and interesting lot. The proposal's rather interesting. I would like you to make any comments on that particular aspect of it.
So I was just going to suggest in advance, as whether or not Joel was going to be here this evening or not, prior to making any recommendations to the zoning board, you could either view the opening hearing where it was presented, and I can provide the link to that. But if you want to take the opportunity to hear a short presentation from Joel, then we can do that as well. It's up to the board.
I'd like to hear Joel's short presentation.
I think it's a good idea, yes.
We'll
Joel, go
promote
ahead.
him as a panelist. If I can. Once. Okay. Be coming in shortly.
Okay, hi again. So, of course, the truck, Jake breaking outside my window because I'm now on this panel. Sorry for that. So again, the word short was thrown around. I will try and adhere to that word short. I'll just start the PowerPoint up once this truck stops. My goodness.
I like details too, Joel, so,
Okay, all right. Then we'll do a good blend. But basically, and I'll try and focus this on you're the planning board, so I'll try to just focus. I'll give you the overall and kind of hit the planning specific, as Greg alluded to. This runs the gamut as far as the actual permit itself, because it's a comprehensive permit. But I'll try and keep it focused after I give you the overview on the real planning side, where this board is the expert on planning matters. By way of background, I should also mention this has already gone to the Conservation Commission. They have elected to simply recommend to the zoning board that any permit granted be conditioned upon a notice of intent being filed. Part of this project is in a buffer zone to a wetland. And so the Conservation Commission is going to see that independently. You are the second referral board that I've been to on this so far. And I don't think we've had any departmental reviews come back just yet. So what are we trying to do? We are trying to construct a 30-unit apartment building at 50R Maplewood Avenue. We are trying to construct pedestrian access to and from this housing development. And we are trying to reconfigure traffic flow on the adjacent commercial property. It's actually a mixed-use property. As you recall from previous meetings, there are some apartments above the car wash. You actually know this history. I've been here before. We've talked about trying to do an overlay, and we just couldn't quite make it work. The overlay required pulling in a bunch of other nearby parcels, and the concern I recall hearing from this board was, if we're going to impact this entire area with this residential component overlay, you really wanted to kind of tie it into what's coming down the line for the TOD, et cetera. And so we weren't able to kind of figure out something that worked for my client's specific project and the impact it was going to have on all the other properties. So by doing this comprehensive permit, it allows for just the development of this one lot back here in yellow without changing the zoning for any of the other properties. And still leaves the rest of the Railroad Avenue, Maplewood Avenue corridor untouched for the planning board to eventually decide what to do as far as overlaying a future TOD or a otherwise a self-governed sort of transit adjacent overlay. I'm rotating the plan this way because all the filed plans are in this orientation. So it's the same picture you just saw, just kind of rotated 90 degrees to the right. I have the full set of plans here. I won't go through all of them. I will pause for a second to talk about access. Again, this being the planning board, I think the zoning board is going to want to hear from you on access, good, bad, or otherwise. So one of the things we're going to do is address a problem that's been noted by this board and others on the existing car wash parcel, which is that right now in the area I'm circling, there are two entrances / exits that really, are people are free to come and go as they please. And then you have people coming in and out, people coming in and out. And so as part of this process, we're going to clean this up. We're going to make clockwise flow around the car wash building. We're going to add traffic islands where necessary to make sure that traffic is controlled coming through. We are also going to use signage here and here to make sure that traffic does not flow counter when they come in. We are closing off this existing entrance So there will be only one way in off Whistle Stop Way in the rear, or one way in from Maplewood Avenue at the front. And then everything will circulate either, through the car wash like this or around the car wash like this. And what this does obviously is it controls traffic in a more predictable manner. It also keeps things a little safer. We'll have a brand new sidewalk, which is this right here, leading all the way from Maplewood. It'll cross the entrances with obviously striped crosswalks over to the housing development. One of the concerns that I think planning staff and this board had with previous iterations was lack of pedestrian connectivity from any development in the rear to Maplewood Avenue. Whistle Stop Way, we're not looking to actually improve that layout with a sidewalk. We don't want to get any closer to the wetland, and we don't want to constrict the width of the pavement. So Bill Wheat, as you know, owns the car wash property through a separate entity, and there's going to be a perpetual permanent easement granted across this property for the use by public and the private residents in the back. So the sidewalk will be on this property of 50 Maplewood Avenue, not within the Whistle Stop Way. But again, it'll function as a public sidewalk, and there, any condition of the comprehensive permit requiring such is offered and accepted by the applicant. And then again, as far as traffic flow and safety, there's a separate dedicated vehicular entrance and exit from Whistle Stop Way. This is wide, and the reason this is wide, if I actually step back one slide, is that this parking lot has been designed to allow for the Gloucester Fire Department's largest apparatus, which is currently the ladder truck, to be able to come all the way through and turn around without having to back up or do a three-point turn or anything like that. Parking is mainly out in front of the building. The proposal has 30 units of housing and a total of, I believe, 35 parking spaces, including some handicap spaces here. And we modeled this after the R5 zoning requirement, which is one space per dwelling unit. The reality is that we anticipate many of the tenants of these units will be choosing not to have a car. One of the benefits from this project is that you can very easily live in one of these apartments and walk to the grocery store, walk to downtown, walk to public transportation to get you to and from your place of work, and that sort of thing. So we're thinking this is going to be attractive to people who either don't have cars or people who want to give up their cars and live a car-free existence, in the downtown. Nevertheless, just in case every single one of these units has a car, there are sufficient spaces on site to cover the parking for that.
Did the fire department reviewed this, Joel?
So we've used what's called the turning template they give us. So we know it works. The fire department is reviewing it, and we expect that they will agree that their fire truck can navigate through this. Again, we've done the math, we've applied the turning template provided by the city, and we know that it works, but obviously the fire department will double check our work to make sure that they can. I suppose separately, I should also mention when talking about fire safety, this entire building will be sprinkled, so it'll have modern fire protection. And then green space, because of the parking requirement and because of how much room the fire truck needs to get in and out, it does require a lot of parking lot space. However, you can see pretty much every bit of the property that is not building or lot is going to be vegetated, and wherever we can get some trees planted, we're going to plant trees, including even in the middle of the island around the fire truck turnaround on the far left of your screen. So to the extent that we can add greenage to this property, we are, but again, there is a constraint in that the building takes up a portion of the property, and this really large parking and driving area that's required to ensure fire access eats up a lot of what could otherwise be green space. Layout of the units, it is 27. They're called studio units, and I want to be clear why they're called studio units. These are not studios in the sense that you walk in and you see their bedroom, you see their bed, and the bed's right next to the kitchen, that sort of thing. There is in each one of these quote unquote studio units, a divider. And you'll see this little, like a doorway, right? Doorway into what I would call a bedroom with a closet, separate from the cooking and dining area. The issue is that because there is not a separate living room, in addition to the dining area, kitchen area and bathroom, arguably, this is, from some powers that be beyond me, this is considered a studio. But this is, again, there's going to be privacy. You can very much have the privacy of being in your bedroom. And if someone comes in, is eating dinner, eating breakfast, and you're still asleep or going to bed, you're not in the room, right? So we expect that these quote unquote studio units will function like 1-bedroom units and will be, great opportunities for both young couples, elderly couples, who again, need to have the privacy of a separate bedroom. They'll have it despite the label of quote unquote studio. The other 3 are 3-bedroom units. Again, similar kitchen bathroom setup. It'll have 3 separate bedrooms and a living room, which makes them true 3-bedroom units. And I should probably point out while I'm on the screen, if I can get to my numbers. Hold on one second, guys.
So these are all rental units, or they're not?
These are all rental units. And 8 of them are going to be restricted at 60% area mean income. The requirement for a 40B project is that I think 20 to 25% have to be restricted at no more than 80% area mean income. We're going for a deeper affordability here and going down to 60%. And just to give you an idea of what that means, in the city of Gloucester right now, if you're a household of 3 people, that could be a single parent with 2 children, the 80% income limit is $100,000, and the 60% income limit is in the low 70s. So if, for example, you are a school teacher who has been teaching for 12 years and you are a single mom with 2 kids, you are at 60% of the income limit. You are considered, it's below, you're officially at low income at that point, right? It's not just affordable, it's at low income, even though you are a teacher with advanced degrees and have been in the district for over a decade. You still qualify for a unit like this. You are a young, almost any of the city departments, right? You're starting off the DPW, the fire department, the police department, et cetera, kind of getting your career off the ground. You are a apprentice electrician. All those salaries typically start well below the limit, especially if there's multiple people. A 2-person household is $89,750 for 80% of median income, right? So these are, despite the fact that we're providing these limits, it doesn't disqualify people who are existing members of the community. This is not a situation where you have to be making absolutely nothing in order to qualify. You need to be on a measly Social Security check every month. You can absolutely be a member of this community, working and living here, and qualify for one of these units due to the way that these prices work out. The other thing I'll mention is that as far as the pricing on these, and I say this just as a guide, if building existed,
I'm in the middle of a Zoom.
so if this building existed tomorrow, right? I can snap my fingers and this building, boom, is there. Versus the fair market rent for a studio, which is over $1,800, and the fair market rent for a 1-bedroom, which is $1,986. Every one of these studio units, including the ones that are not deed restricted, would go for $1,400. So that's roughly 25 to 30% less than what market rate is for a studio. The 3-bedroom, again, around here, a 3-bedroom is priced per the HUD standards at $2,966. These 3-bedrooms, regardless of whether they were deed restricted or not, will be rented out for about $2,000. That's again about 1/3 less than the market rate. Obviously, if it takes a year or 2 to permit and build these buildings, those prices may shift as everything shifts, but I want to kind of give an idea. They'll only shift proportionally. Right now, the target is to actually make it so you could pragmatically live in Gloucester, work in Gloucester, and utilize something like this for your housing. The last thing I'll show you are just some renderings. This is what it looks like. It's 3 separate buildings. This is what it looks like from Whistle Stop Way. The nondescript building on the left would be the back of the car wash. This is from the front, inside the lot. This is basically from the entrance, the vehicular entrance, and this would be down by the fire truck turnaround. I think I'll cut this screen share here. And then the last thing I'll just kind of talk about before I turn it over from this monologue is the standard the zoning board looking at is whether granting this permit is, quote, consistent with local needs, okay? And one of the things that 40B and 40B guidance says is to look at any applicable housing production plans. Your board is very familiar with the 2017 housing production plan. And although it's expiring this year, to what degree expiring means, if you look through the goals, goal 1 was to create opportunities to develop diverse and affordable housing. Goal 2 was to encourage affordable housing development. Goal 4 was to identify sites that are most appropriate to accommodate Gloucester's need for growth in housing. Goal 7 was to minimize the displacement of lower income households, and goal 8 was to promote safe, healthy housing and living. I think as this board knows, like most people who have been paying attention in Gloucester, the last 10, 15, maybe 20 years, nearly all of the development residential has been higher end development, save for the Cameron's project, the YMCA project, which is in process, and the affordable units that folk like Sean Henry basically forced into the Halyard apartments, you know, despite their hope otherwise. Despite those 3 kind of outliers, everything else that's been, every other unit that's been, or development that's come through Gloucester the last, again, 10, 15, maybe 20 years has been high end. So the idea that we would, again, be adding 30 units of workforce housing, I think is pretty significant. Oh, you know what? I'm really sorry. I just want to show one more thing for everyone. I think we looked at this last time I was here talking, but I think it's worth showing again, as far as the area where we are. The green star shows the lot, and I think it's important to remember that across the street, we have a 4-story building with 70 units. Across the street, we have 60 units of low-income housing across several multi-story buildings. And then a little further out, we have McPherson, which is 6 stories and 97 units, and the Sheedy building, which is 5 stories and 81 units. And I bring that up again from a planning perspective, answering the question, okay, is this the right spot for these units? And I think you take into account, obviously, the proximity to necessities like, you know, the downtown grocery stores, public transportation, the train especially. You can also take into account the idea that we as a city have kind of allocated this area, probably in part because these amenities are here, for other projects in which there are, you know, some dense residential developments, you know, on single lots. So I think this kind of fits in with what's going on over there. And I think what is going on over there pulls in this sort of development. That's it for my short-ish presentation. For reference, the ZBA presentation was 50 slides long, so you still got off the hook to some degree. Jane, hopefully it was detailed enough.
So all these units are considered affordable then, is that correct?
So 8 of the units will be restricted, quote unquote, affordable. What I'm saying is from a pragmatic standpoint, due to, frankly, the size of these units and their location, they will all pragmatically be affordable units. They won't, you know, have the restriction on them. You want to qualify, for example, you don't have to prove your income to get one of these units. But the reality is the rent you'll be paying will be like, you know, what I always call little a affordable as a factor of their modest size, the modest design of the development and their location.
And there's only the one entry to this, lot, right?
One vehicular.
Vehicular. Right?
So Joel, is there, well, first of all, I think you said 30 units, did you?
I did.
Yeah, so your mass housing site approval says 24. Did that change?
Yes, so what happened was when we applied to the state for their eligibility review, the city was given an opportunity to provide support, provide opposition, provide critique, provide comment. The city responded with some thoughtful comment. And although the state approved the original design kind of, despite the request from the city, my client then went back and tried to incorporate some of the concerns or addressing the concerns raised by the city. And in doing so, we increased the unit count to make sure that kind of the added expense of some of these design changes are recouped in the final project. So again, for instance, issues about connectivity, issues about the traffic flow in and out of the site, that's all going to be taken care of now. And the state has seen the updated plans, and the approval still stands.
Thanks. And another question about access. It looked like the stairs were actually, even though it says open air stairs, they're covered. But it looks like also there's no elevator. There's one step up to the first floor apartments. Is there any handicapped access for these apartments?
Yeah, so the potential for reasonable accommodation on the first floor is really easy. So if someone who needs access accommodations, moves in, they're very easily made accessible. There is no elevator. Again, one of the ways you can, in order to keep the eventual rental costs down, you have to keep modest with the design. So it's going to be 2 stories. If you live on the second floor, you're using the stairs. The stairs are covered, so you're not getting rained on, but when it's 10 degrees out, it's not a stairwell to hang out in. It's going to be cold out there.
I mostly thought of snow, but to be dangerous, to be safe, better.
Right.
Yes, Beverly.
Well, thank you for bringing this revised. Everyone agreed when looking at this that it was noteworthy to use it for housing, but a very compromised site without adequate public access to Maplewood Street. And so you've done 2 things here. One, you've resolved that issue and created adequate access. And secondly, you haven't needed to rezone the whole area, which was your initial, which was from our point of view, quite a reach. And now that we're having to look at how to address the MBTA standards might have been problematic. So thank you for doing that. I just have 2 suggestions. First of all, given the composition of people who will live there, the term affordable housing has really lost its meaning. What does that mean? And low-income housing is negatively loaded as a word. I would use the term workforce housing with however many units are deed restricted, with the knowledge that deed restriction has an income test related to it. But by calling it workforce housing, I think you get over the hump with potential people who might be potentially negative about this. And we know we do have people who do not like multi-unit housing. And I think workforce would be not only an accurate term, but I think it would be less loaded. And then the second thing is, I think your site plan is fine, although it took me a while to get oriented. I would suggest that you put entry and exit arrows on the driveway into the site. And similarly, you put an entrance only, the way I read it, I hope I'm correct, an entrance only arrow into the car wash, because obviously people drive through the car wash and then exit directly onto Maplewood, right? So it might be helpful for someone reading the site plan to see those arrows.
Okay, that's a great thought. Thank you.
Are there any further questions that people would ask at this time? If not, I would like to turn the meeting over to our chairman, Rick Newman, who has joined us. Rick, you want to take over as chair?
That's fine. I'm sorry for the tardiness. I had my days mixed up, but I'm here in spirit and in presence. So Hank, just for continuity, why don't you continue running the meeting? I'm happy to be vice chair for the moment, just until we get caught up.
Do you have any comments you'd like to make on this this particular proposal?
Well, again, we don't have any sort of regulatory guidance in this process. I think the letter that's in the folder was signed by the previous administration, sort of outlines, officially, all the things that are a challenge in this project. As we get to a point of offering, a letter of recommendation or a letter not in recommendation, but however, whatever form that takes, I think that we were obligated to be a part of the process. And I think that we need to fulfill that obligation. But again, there's, for all the reasons that we've talked about in the past on the site, it's very difficult, and 40B basically just throws everything out the window in a good way or a bad way. I appreciate Beverly's comment on the, lowercase affordable component. This will take a while to get sorted out, but let's just move through the process professionally and do our jobs, I guess.
Are there other further comments that we would make at this time? We're not required to make a recommendation, right, Rick? That is correct. Sean, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Joel, was there or could there be any consideration towards going up to 3 floors so that you could shrink the footprint of the building to allow for more open space? And also, I think the other concern in looking at the building layout is the lack of storage both within the units. The studio units have pretty small closet space, and then there appears to be no communal storage area where, again, as you were saying, a lot of these folks might be without a car, but typically if they're without a car, they're going to have bicycles or maybe multiple bikes. And there doesn't appear to be any accommodation on the site in the way the building's currently designed to offer some storage space for those items, recreational items, extra clothing, whatever it might be.
Yeah, sure. So if I can respond real quickly, it's a great
Go
point.
Go ahead, Joel.
Thanks. So as far as the height, et cetera, when you get beyond the 2 floors, run two distinct issues. One is the engineering of the building. You begin requiring a lot more steel to go up to that 3rd level. You also, because of the geotechnical results we have on site, you also begin having more weight concentrated on a smaller footprint in, again, an area that was a slum, right? So we have to be very careful to make sure that this building is going to be, constructed in a way that it's not going to have unnecessary sinkage. And what you'd have to do to either go up or add unit count. It's almost like you'd have to add so much. Again, we're talking about how as you add expense, you have to add units to make up for the expense, and it would become an entirely different project to recoup the additional cost of making this a taller building. To your point about storage, you're actually not the first. This was actually discussed at the Zoning Board of Appeals, and my client is looking into some communal sheds and communal bike racks, trying to find on-site storage for residents to be able to use, so that they have things that you don't want to drag your muddy bike into your studio. You can go put it over in the shed or put it in the rack, that sort of thing. Maybe a covered bike rack. We haven't figured out what the exact answers, but there is room on site for that sort of thing. And so if a recommendation came out of this planning board with that being a suggestion, without speaking for them, my guess is that would be received well at the zoning board, because that was a discussion held there as well. The last thing I would like to mention, just as far as timing goes, is so far we're very appreciative. Joe Parisi, the chair of the zoning board, and Suzanne Egan, the city attorney, who were on at the last meeting with us. I wouldn't call the timeline aggressive, but they are certainly looking to move things forward. So they, for instance, at the last meeting, asked Bill Sanborn to go around and kind of like check in on all the apartments, because they're hopeful that when we go back to the zoning board next week, if departments have any questions, concerns, or recommendations, that those are in for next week. Certainly the boards weren't discussed as far as being that speedy with it. I have said the Concom is done with their review, but if the planning board intends to make a recommendation, I think it'd be great to communicate that, at least the intention, to the zoning board, so they know to look for it. Because in fairness, I would not want to, obviously I'm going to be looking to move this as expeditiously as possible. And I would not want to, be so fortunate as to be wrapping this up at ZBA, and then all of a sudden a letter from the planning board kind of lands and we have to step back, right? So if the intention is to provide a recommendation, which is totally your option, and I think a good idea, I would at least make sure that's communicated back sooner rather than later that we are working on a recommendation, and maybe even projected, like, we hope to have it to you by your meeting of whatever. They only meet once in November and once in December due to the holidays that are in there. So they meet November 10th and they meet again on December 8th. And so again, it's your option, but again, I feel like as the only one hopping between all these meetings, it's my obligation to at least let you know what's being discussed at these other meetings as far as timeline and that sort of thing. So thank you.
Joel, could you just, I'm just trying to understand, it looks like there's along the eastern perimeter of the site, there's some sort of grade wall. Is the site being elevated? And if so, by how much over existing grade? It looks like it extends almost from maybe the entrance to the car wash to the length of the property. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah, no, I'm pulling the plan up right now. I don't want to.
Okay.
Cool. So actually, I'll put this on the screen if that's okay. And we can look
Yes,
at it.
please.
Sure thing. So if you look at some of the current contours, you see we have 45 right now, literally covering it up with my check marks. That's 45. And you see the proposed contour up here is 47. However, down here along the wall, you've got looks like 47 at the top of the wall, 47.2, 47.4. So if it's a 12-inch retaining wall, the top is at 47 plus, would look like this existing grade of 45 will be coming up about a foot to get there. You're already at 46 when you get down here. But my guess is yes, this is coming up a bit. We're about a 2-foot difference between existing grade and the top of this wall. And this wall is only supposed to be 12 inches tall. So, I would say, yes, there's going to be some moderate filling. There is I believe a stormwater report filed with, and certainly,
yep.
If you'd like a more in-depth answer than what I can give you right now, I have no problem supplementing that response.
I mean, again, it's up to the board. I think it's just a really constrained site. It doesn't seem like it does a lot of things really well because it's a lot of compromise. And I understand that you got to work with what you got to work with. But you've got, fire access pushing up against unit size, unit mix, open space, and there's just only so much available space. So I think, the concerns that were outlined in the preliminary, some of them may be addressed. Obviously, at that point, there wasn't any engineering analysis, and that's something that will be vetted. For the board's understanding, I think the intention is for the zoning board to similarly that the planning board would do if this was in front of them, to vet the project with the assistance of not only city staff, but outside consultants. This area obviously is a significant drainage concern. I think there are actually some on-site infrastructure owned by the applicant for trying to deal with a pumping system for stormwater in the area that may or may not function as it maybe did in the past. So, the introduction of a building in this location, substantial amount of impervious area. I know there's obviously drainage design with also some potential infiltration. There's a lot of moving pieces on just the, how to introduce a structure and parking into this area without exacerbating conditions or in worst case, causing any impact to surrounding property. But the point about, Sean's point about storage and things like that, these are just about 400 square feet, which doesn't provide a lot of opportunity for storage. And again, I think that's the compromise of you're trying to provide fire access, which is vital. But it comes at the size of the building and also marginalizing it to one side. Thinking about potential future residents, what their experience is like, what they see, the way the building is facing, the commercial district in front of it. Because of the fire access, there's no screening on the other side, which may be more important than screening the rear, which is mostly kind of clad buildings with very little window exposure or anything like that. So it's something we'll continue to look at if the board wants to see any of those pieces in real time as they come in, or base a review on Joel's application or presentation of the application, as well as the application materials. Kind of looking to you as to how you would like to proceed, because you can, you're kind of in a little bit of a free form in terms of it's just submitted to you for kind of an advisory opinion or recommendation to the zoning board. And that can come in, a variety of forms.
Yes, Beverly?
I have a question and a comment. The question is, how many of the 3-bedroom units, if any, are part of the deed restricted complement? And I ask because for people with lower incomes, 3-bedroom apartments are very hard to come by. And so I would hope at least one of the 4, if not 2 of the 4, were in that complement of deed restricted.
So I'm nervous to answer beyond yes, at least one has to be. And I'm not sure whether, frankly, I'm not sure how many are allowed to be, because the way you restrict units have to be comparable and proportionate, I believe. So that's a great question. I am actually sorry I don't have the exact answer. I'm surprised it's the first time someone's asked me that. I know at least one has to be, and whether the other 2 can be, must be, or will be, I don't have that answer, and I'm writing that down right now to clarify.
Okay, we've answered my question, and I think it's important that at least one. And then the second is that I think we have limited say over this, and this may not be, as Greg says, the perfect compromise, although it does use a piece of property that's highly compromised in terms of its shape and its lack of adequate access to Maplewood, as well as whatever conservation issues there are. So it seems to me that we have limited input, and whereas if it came to us, we might be able to impose more conditions. But I think it's a really important project. 38 units is a very important contribution to a housing supply in our community, given the rents of this are in line with more moderate income, and I think we should support it.
Okay, we're not required. Is there a time on this, Craig, in terms of our input?
I think the only thing that Joel has pointed out is, the zoning board, probably my guess, just as my experience with bringing on any technical review of a project, unless Joel, I'm not sure how far that's advanced or not. But I would gather that would probably take at least a few weeks to bring somebody on board to begin a technical review. So that probably pushes us into November. And you said you have 2 potential dates with the zoning board, one late November 10th and then again in December 8th.
The zoning board will meet November 10th, and the zoning board will meet again December 8th, and those are the last 2 meetings of the year. Jeffrey Durkin, third-party reviewer, has been sent a scope of work over to the city. Suzanne Egan asked for a check for $7,000 this week, and that's been sent up to the city hall, so that is moving already.
Okay. So if the target would be the next regular meeting, we may not have a meeting on November 3rd. So the next regular meeting of the board would be on November 17th. So if that seems like adequate time for people to review it, think about it, we can revisit it on the 17th. to provide something to the board, the zoning board in advance of the meeting on the 8th.
That sounds good to me.
Will you be meeting on the 1st also? As we get second bite at the apple in case you can't wrap it up on the 17th?
Yes, we would otherwise then have a meeting on the 1st and the 15th of December.
Thank you.
Hank?
Yes, go ahead. Jane, did you have a
Okay, go
comment?
ahead.
Yeah, I have one more tiny quick comment because I'm still hung up on poor handicapped people who are really also stroller people and old people who aren't necessarily in a wheelchair. But I did notice that your handicap parking spaces are all the way over to the right, which guarantees that it's basically the longest possible distance to most of the apartments. So an observation would be, it would be way better if they were in the middle.
Sean, did you have a comment, question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if it would make sense for the subcommittee to meet but sometime between now and our next meeting to try to formulate at least a list of general concerns of the board so that there's a basis of how to frame our discussion at the next full meeting so that we can actually maybe come to a conclusion and
I think that's a very
push
good
something out of it.
suggestion, yes. Greg, how do you feel about that, Greg?
Happy to do that.
Okay. Any
Could
further
be,
questions?
certainly create some efficiency.
Any other questions at this time? I think it's a good idea. Yes, Rick.
So again, sort of two comments, one to sort of address Jane's concern. Back when we were dealing with Swan Net at the industrial park, we had a very similar discussion on ADA parking, to the point so much as they actually called into Boston and spoke to somebody about how ridiculous it is that, you know, handicap parking is the furthest away from the front door or, you know, access. And the response, the official response was, as long as it's there, right? So there's no, you know, state level guidance on where parking, you know, handicap is marked and where the entrance is, so which is not intuitive to me either. And the only other comment that I had, and when I listened to the ZBA meeting, this was, you know, affordable rents. I mean, yes, they're small units. You're not going to charge $2,000 a month for them, but you know, these are, I think it would be appropriate to use the term market rate apartments versus affordable apartments if they're not deed restricted. Because it sounds like there's a bill of goods being sold that these are 30 affordable units and they're really not. They might be lower price, but they're certainly going to be market rate. And so I think it's an important distinction to make. And I guess just for the overarching, you know, we'll participate, but I think that, you know, all the necessary oversight needs to happen. And these 40Bs sort of come and go and we, you know, and they get built and that's that. But again, this is a very tricky site for all the reasons that have already been mentioned. Certainly the drainage onto appropriate or adjacent properties is a major problem. So all that stuff that we would normally put our thumbprint on, I don't feel that we have, you know, A, the authority, or B, you know, the input to say, you know, these are what our real concerns are, and that the answer might be a no, frankly. And, you know, this project has been before us. And that's why we're here today. Okay. And that's why 40B is here. So.
Yes, Joel, go ahead.
If I may, Rick, I think you probably missed that part of the presentation. What I did present to the board, which I did not have at the time of the zoning meeting you watched, is that the non-restricted 3 bedrooms are to be priced somewhere around 66% of market rate, and the studios are going to be around 75% of market rate. So even the ones that are not restricted affordable, as compared to market rate, will still be less. As Beverly suggested, workforce housing, we use whatever terminology is you know, most comfortable, but you know, you're not going to see 3 bedrooms here going for what you see 3 bedrooms going for elsewhere in Gloucester, regardless of whether they're restricted or not. It's not necessary, and it's not the intention of the applicant.
So how do you manage that then, Joel?
The market manages it.
No, but you're saying, 65% or, 60% of AMI, so. I mean, is there an oversight that says, oh, now HUD has gone to, whatever, 135 and we're at 60% of that number? I mean, is that the intention?
No, I was using the roughly $1,400 and roughly $2,000 between the 1 and the 3s, asking
Right.
what market rate is, which is almost 2,000 for a 1 and almost 3,000 for a 3. And so again, as I mentioned, with a modest design, as Greg pointed to, the 400 square foot units. If someone has the $2,000 a month to spend on a 1-bedroom, I imagine they're going to get themselves a little more room than they have here, right? If they're looking to spend considerably less, regardless of whether this is an income restricted unit, these will be priced lower as a factor of their design. They're designed to be efficient, smaller units that are, providing, safe housing, but not necessarily, with extra bells and whistles that you might otherwise expect living in Gloucester for, $2,000 a month for a 1-bedroom.
Thank you, Joel. Yes, Sean, you have further question?
Is there, continuing to focus on pricing and the language of affordability for a second, would there be any downside to your client to actually deed restrict the units entirely in some fashion, given that it's his intent to keep them moderately priced, and that by dint of their design, they will be sort of on the moderate end of that market rate category that Rick is mentioning? Because I know there are, I think Mass Housing has a specific, I think they actually call it a workforce housing grant of, I think it's 100 grand per unit that a developer builds over and above what's required with either with inclusionary zoning. So if you're adding more than you need, you open yourself up for those grant funds. So would there, and I know from talking to your client earlier, he hadn't done a lot of exploration about the ins and outs of affordability grants, et cetera, deed restrictions. So I think it would be a valuable exercise to actually look into that and to see if all the units could in fact be in some way deed restricted, so they serve the purpose that your client's talking about serving in terms of being in that lower market rate. Even if it means you have some at 60%, you go some deed restricted at 70%, some at 80 if you need that, or you work with an organization that can get you funding for 30% AMI units.
Okay, obviously I can't quite answer that right now, but I've typed up what you've spoken to me about just now, and that's something I'll definitely bring up to my client, and we'll look into it, and I can commit to reporting back in November.
Greg, would it be appropriate to assign this to the committee, as Sean has suggested, for a recommendation back to the board at our next meeting?
Sure.
Would that be appropriate at this time? Do we need a motion on that, or is it just appropriate to just go ahead and do it?
You can make a motion to refer it to the subcommittee.
Okay. Do we have a motion to refer it to the subcommittee?
So moved.
Thank you, Sean, or Rick, Sean made the motion. Rick, you seconded it?
Rick made the motion. I'll
Rick made
second
the
it.
motion, Sean seconded it. Okay, fine, thank you.
I
Roll
never
call
get to make
vote.
a motion.
Roll call, please.
Member Noonan,
Yes.
member McCarl,
Yes,
member Bookin,
Yes,
member Cook,
Yes.
member Henry,
Yes.
member Remsen.
Yes,
Okay, we'll coordinate
you.
that over the next couple of weeks.
very good.
Thanks, Joel. I would have
Okay.
given you an
Good night.
invitation, but I wasn't gonna require you to do anything because you're not required to do anything. But thank
I
you
think it
for
worked out
coming.
just fine, and we'll see you in November.
Great,
Thank you.
thanks.
Just one quick comment in closing. As a apartment owner and landlord, I would be very interested in when you look into this, subsidy for, above and beyond, sort of chasing down Sean's idea. It would be interesting to see a pro forma of, what, apartments are renting for in this voucher system today, and an analysis of where things are. Again, sort of understanding that market rate and the affordability component are obviously two different things. But it would make a huge contribution, frankly, if, these units could be all deed restricted, and let the mechanism of of HUD, manage it, right? And if I could get Section 8 subsidies for the apartments that I have, I'd be tickled pink, frankly, meaning that they're more expensive than what I'm charging my tenants today. So anyways, just a passing comment, but I'd like to see that.
Hi, this is Ann.
Sorry.
Yes. Was there someone that, Craig?
That was Anne, and she by
That
mistake
was,
wasn't
yeah,
muted.
I was just double checking if she was coming in and she wasn't muted. So we're all set.
We're all set. We can move on. Let
Thank
me
you.
let me turn the chairmanship back to the chairman, and Rick, it's
Thank
all
you.
yours.
I don't have an agenda up yet, but.
Craig, can you put that agenda up?
Yeah, I just closed it out, unfortunately. Give me a second.
Already out the door.
Second. Whoops. Okay, there you go.
Okay,
So,
so we've gotten through the comprehensive permit review, and next is pre-application. Well, here we go. My glasses are working better every time. Pre-application submitted by Michael Farity, Esquire, representing William Friend for division of land at Wolf Hill Way, map 88, lots 8 and 25.
so you had a simple plan in the planning board folder. I anticipated that there was going to be a lot more information provided, introducing what the concept is. I spoke to Attorney Faherty just before I went on vacation, I think it was. And so it was not on the last agenda because we thought that it might be. He actually came in today. He has been under the weather for the last week. So he will be augmenting the pre-application or pre-application submission in advance of the meeting for November 17th. So he's asked to continue it to that date. And you'll have hopefully a lot more context of what's being proposed.
So Greg, I emailed Gemma today, who I think forwarded it to you, that it might be helpful to have in that folder the subdivision plan that was adopted.
Yeah, that was part of some of the requests after meeting on site and reviewing the initial plan to have more context and more understanding of what's being proposed.
Mhm.
Because it's a very busy plan. I think we all recognize that during the subdivision review. So sometimes it's helpful to kind of turn some of the layers off so you can really see what the moving pieces are.
Mhm. And there also might be a lot line missing, or at least compared to the subdivision plan.
So
Late.
Should we vote on continuing this to the next meeting, Mr. Chairman?
is it the 3rd or the 17th, Greg?
I think it's going to be the 17th.
Okay. So just a motion to continue the pre-application process for Wolf Hill Way to the meeting of November 17th. Need a motion for that?
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Hank. Roll call.
Okay,
vote,
roll
please.
call. Member Noonan,
Yes.
Member McCarl,
Yes.
Member Bookin,
Yes.
Member Cook,
Yes.
Member Henry,
Yes.
and Member Rems.
Yes.
Okay, next under other business, discussion of floodplain zoning and regulations. Just a light and airy topic.
Okay. Here. So I forwarded out, and I apologize for the late delivery. It was really just a summary of the motions of the subcommittee, which met over 2 meetings to review the 4 kind of pieces that are associated with this potential floodplain zoning, as well as regulation proposal that we've been working on with Ann Herbst, who's also with us from MAPC for not too much longer. So essentially, I think we have drafts, although I did receive one comment from Jane that I'm going to want to spend a little time on. But had motions that the subcommittee kind of felt like they were in the shape that they were prepared to recommend each of the 4 documents that's in the Google Drive for the full board to consider. They consist of starting kind of like with the easy, any project that's that would be proposed in the existing floodplain, as well as kind of the expanded area that's considered kind of a future flood risk, would be required to fill out a checklist. It's really an acknowledgement of the applicant understanding that they are in these zones or in these areas that might be of future risk, and to kind of really contemplate and think about that as they design their project. So that's a fairly simple one. It would be just a part of the building permit process, but it kind of captures things that are not special permitted, single family use, 2-family use, things that would otherwise just go through the building permit process, would now have to kind of make these additional considerations. And then from there, we start to move into another one that was fairly simple that you've already discussed, and I don't think had a lot of discussion at the subcommittee, which was the prohibition of new roadways in the floodplain. I think that's a pretty straightforward concept. We did have a proposal back, I think around 2012 or 2014, for a roadway to extend off of the back shore towards the ocean in a preliminary plan. And I think the planning board did exactly what it should have done and denied that preliminary plan. So this would just codify that the siting of roads can't be within the floodplain, which makes all great sense. And then the consideration of flood risk and how it relates to proposed development is proposed to be kind of permeated through the zoning ordinance as a consideration in special permit processes. The planning board, the zoning board, the city council, as they issue special permits, they point to a standard 6 criteria that they apply. One of them is the natural environment. This is being a little bit more specific and very clear that current and future flood risk would be a part of the consideration for special permitted uses. And then finally, the last piece, which I think we spent a fair amount of time, is the actual floodplain overlay district, which is comprised of the current FEMA flood zones, future FEMA flood zones as they are amended, as well as the mapped future flood risk that's associated with the state modeling of the 2.4 foot increase in mean sea level and flooding associated with that in the future. And also if that is updated. As was pointed out, it's a good idea to try to make the ordinances as accommodating as possible so that you don't have to necessarily revisit them all the time. And I think what we spent the most time on, as Ann outlined, this is really built off of the state model of, they have a state floodplain overlay district ordinance. And then really kind of the nuts and bolts of the discussion was surrounding whether there would be any additional restrictions, conditions, or requirements for uses within the floodplain overlay district. So I don't know if we can probably focus just on the overlay district draft, because I think where we left the planning board discussion before it was referred to the subcommittee, people seemed fairly comfortable with the subdivision regulation that would require not allow the siting of new roadways in floodplain. The idea of having it a consideration within special permits and site plan, whether it's a special permit or, yeah, so that permeating through the ordinance of reference to that as a consideration. And then the checklist, which again, I think is fairly straightforward. It's prompting and making sure that people acknowledge where they are, where they're proposing a project and what they might do to minimize the risk. And then really, as the bulk of the discussion was around, are we going to place any potential limitations on, in particular, the velocity zone, and then also whether there be some sort of measured limitation within the AE zones, which are not subject to storm waves of 3 feet or greater. That makes sense. I'd also lean towards Jane if you want to kind of lead any of the discussion as being the chair of the subcommittee.
Sure. I have to admit, I was zoning out a little bit, but
Wow, I ramble.
we have 4 documents, which I think is, if I could summarize what Greg said. One, they're all slam dunks, except for the one that changes what can be built in the VE and the AE zones. So I don't know if you guys want to review the ones that are slam dunks, or you want to head straight to the meaty discussion. Anybody?
Into the meat.
Okay. So if Greg, do you want to put up
Yep.
the one that deletes section 1 to 27? So the blue is the black is basically the state, example bylaw. And the blue is things that we added, and nothing is really interesting until you get to section 5.5.7. And the subcommittee went over this in great detail. So I don't know if you had a chance to digest it, but it is basically saying that we would have no new construction of a residential dwelling in the VE zone. And I can't remember how many lots that are currently undeveloped in the VE zone now. I think, I don't know, not very many, 100 or something like that. And also no movement, alteration, expansion of an existing residential to increase lot coverage in the VE zone. So you could renovate, but you can't make your house bigger. And the VE zone is basically the velocity zone. So it's the properties along Wingersheet Coffins, it's the properties on Ipswich Bay, it's the properties on Gloucester Harbor. It's not the properties that are in the river, but it's the properties that face east and also on Ipswich Bay. So that's a big one. I don't know if that is a tough sell or it's not a tough sell. And then the second big thing that we went over is the AE zone, which are the properties in the river, and maybe set back a little on Washington Street and stuff like that. Basically saying that we would not increase the lot coverage by more than 10% in either a new dwelling or accessory dwelling or a alteration, expansion, renovation, etc.
So I would just clarify one thing with that last statement you made. We talked about that you wouldn't be allowed to increase the lot coverage of the actual, within the actual floodplain overlay district on the lot. So if you were entirely landward of
Yep.
that boundary, you're not restricted in any way other
Right.
than the zoning ordinance requirements. But if you were a new
Right.
lot or an existing structure, you could only expand within that area by 10%. So it is definitely measured. It's encouraging people to.
Right,
move.
so your lot could be half in, half out of the floodplain, and we're saying it's just the part that pertains to you, is just the part that's in the floodplain. And I had a comment on this, Greg, that I had sent to you saying on B, shall not cause the lot coverage of the, I would think that you'd want that to be the total structures, just in case if you're talking about a accessory dwelling or more than one dwelling. Yep, right there where your cursor is. So the subcommittee went back and forth on this, and, you know, we brought up the fact that this could be a taking because it's something you can do now. And if we pass this ordinance, it's something you can't do after that. And that would reduce the value of your heretofore buildable lot. But Anne had pointed out that there have been lawsuits on the Cape where the court has sided with the city or town and has determined that it's not a taking. So this is possible to do.
So one thing I wanted to also add, which, and I didn't want to focus on another kind of presentation this evening, because I think we've kind of gone pretty far. We know why this is being proposed. It's been in 4 planning documents at this point, including the recently approved open space plan and the climate action and resilience plan that's in final draft. The open space plan is done and the CARP is very close to being completed. But I could show you 2 slides right now. The good news is there are not very many lots that are entirely encumbered by the V zone and are of zoning compliance. So we have 2 particular areas where there's a concentration. And I'm going to share a different screen just as a, and we talked about this at the subcommittee as well, which I will work with them also on that final presentation because it's important. The messaging on this is important. But I think, you know, this could be a little bit comforting, I think, in some ways that there's not a lot of potential for the development of lots currently that are 100% in the velocity zone. And so I'll just share.
Yeah, and while you're finding that, the subcommittee did discuss at length how this is, you know, having structures in the VE zone or the AE zone that are at risk are a big, you know, do have an impact on Gloucester in terms of emergency services and rebuilding and, you know, so on and so forth. So
I just took a subset. I've called out in this kind of light blue shading the properties that are 100% in the velocity zone. And you can see that most of them are fairly small properties. There's a couple of larger ones. Some of these are already preserved as part of the efforts associated with back when the 171 Atlantic Street project was underway. There was a group that formulated Save Our Shores. So they've deed restricted some of these from development. But many of them are very narrow strips, are very small, and they're all on the ocean side of Atlantic Road in this particular area. And that's a pretty heavy concentration of the number of lots like that. There's a few in North Gloucester. There's a couple of lots that are entirely within the primary frontal dune on Coffins Beach that have very limited development potential now. And this would make it clear that that would be a restriction on those properties. And then again, there's a few, there's one that was recently developed. It was a V-zone project that's on Washington Street. And there's some potential in that area as well that could be restricted. And then if we go down to Magnolia, you can see that there's a number of lots, again, that are on the opposite side of Shore Road. These are really compromised as well in that you can't site a septic system. This is an area that's not served by public sewer. And so there's further limitation beyond any kind of zoning overlay that might go into place. And to the point of, you know, what is possible, you know, and again, if a property has public sewer, this is what can be constructed. This is actually, you know, from the Coastal Construction Manual, these are the types of things that people can do in these areas. If they have a lot that is probably most likely grandfathered, because we do have a requirement now that you can't create a new entirely floodplain lot. Again, there's not very many of them, but this is the type of construction that is permissible. Elevating a structure above that velocity zone and that wave energy. And there's also an example here. Again, this is something that was reconstructed, I think, after the 91 storm. I think the structure on Shore Road was taken by the sea, and then built back to compliance, and that's what it looks like. So again, most of the properties on the water sides in these areas are undersized. For many of them can't site a septic system. So I don't think there's a huge limitation here. On the flip side as well, thinking about this potential restriction on AE zones, there are very few lots that are 100% in the AE zone, which is kind of smart. I mean, who would do it? I mean, people tended to divide up
Hey,
property.
I did that.
Well, Jane, put that aside. I'm saying the existing lots that are out there, many of them, had access, historically from the first public way all the way down to the water. So there's not too many that don't have some portion of upland on the property. There are some examples apparently that are 100%, but they're probably either already developed, and if they were going to be redeveloped, that's where this limitation would come in, that they couldn't expand more than 10% of the floodplain on the property. I hope
Greg,
those
no,
visuals help a little bit.
yeah, just to check on this coastal construction stuff, but we're saying if we pass this ordinance, there would be no construction like this would be permitted in the VE zone. Part of your
It
property.
would only if there was an existing structure that was going to be raised,
I see,
or
right.
there was an addition to a structure.
Right.
That's where these things would kind of kick
But
in.
no new construction, even if it's on stilts.
Is there a plan of those, the AEs available? Do you have something that shows those?
Sure. Back to that. Come on. So most of these, there are, again, there's not too many lots that are 100% in the AE zone. There's some salt marsh islands. There's actually several of these are owned by Essex County Greenbelt. These are all properties. Can everybody see my cursor?
Yeah, barely.
And I'll try. I may try to do a better job of breaking this down a little bit so people can see it a little bit more. But these are kind of those properties. If you recall, Joel Favazza was in with some A&Rs that divided up a salt marsh, and those parcels were deeded out to abutters. So there aren't too many that are 100% in the AE zone. I mean, again, we're not saying that if there's a structure there, it can't continue, it can't be modified. It would just not be allowed to be expanded more than 10% of the area of the lot.
Greg, you're saying those are 100% AE zone lots?
Yes.
Okay, because I know there are some along Washington Street, like north of like Plum Cove and like that area.
So you see that there are see these little tiny dots here?
Oh, no,
There's
we can't see,
some along
any.
Yeah,
We can't see that.
it's really hard to present this as the
Yeah.
entire city, but I can break that down further.
But if you expand it with your fingers, you can just see them. They're on the west side of that little inlet. Right,
Yeah, there's
Right
some
there,
up in
yeah.
here.
right there.
Let's see what magic we can make happen. Well, we're gonna be able to get that far.
Yeah, there's some down,
Oh, I
on
see.
there you go. See them?
So there's some along Lobster Cove,
Mhm.
probably zooming. Am I waving at you right now, Jane?
Yeah, no, you're
Yep,
doing it.
hi.
And on the
Um,
east side of the bridge,
Yeah, so there's a
is
couple
that
of
Dennison Street maybe?
Dennison Street
Mhm.
here.
And then there should be some up by Folly Cove too. Not Folly Cove. I keep saying Folly Cove, Plum Cove.
Plum Cove. Yeah, so the ones by Plum Cove are actually they're VE zone. That was on the previous slide.
Oh.
Because they're
So
facing
that actually
west.
extends, on the other side of Washington Street.
Mhm,
So that was this example.
right.
And that's Lanesville too, so it's almost a different country, so.
It's my daughter's house, just saying.
What about down by the boulevard, near the Cut Bridge, that neck of the woods?
So there's a big salt marsh piece, a couple of salt marsh pieces, and then this is behind the wastewater treatment plant. This is behind Western Ave. There's a couple of squares of salt marsh back behind there. Again, these are all salt marsh lots here. So again, there's not too many situations where you're unless you're, you have kind of a wharf scenario like Jane, those kind of granite pier type of situations along Lobster Cove. There aren't a ton of properties that aren't pretty much salt marsh as entirely AE zone lots.
So one of the things we discussed in the subcommittee is that we had a tough go with the last round of zoning amendments. And whether or not this is something that would be highly controversial. And I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah, Beverly.
Well, if you strike while the iron is hot, Southwest Florida is a long way from here and it's easy to ignore it. But you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to see what storm surge does to houses that are in very vulnerable locations. And at some point, we have to have a managed retreat from the coast that says, it just is not a safe place to build a house. And certainly it's not a place to rebuild a house that is taken out by storm surge. And this is primarily storm surge we're talking about, are we not?
We're
And
talking
storm
about
surge.
significant flooding events.
Yeah, but it's
100-year
from
events
storm
and beyond.
surge, not wind necessarily, but from water
Yep.
surge.
Yep.
And I think that the advantage of moving forward, first of all, there's a lot of state push on this that we didn't have on our other zoning, which we did more by choice. But if we strike while the iron is hot, as it were, hopefully the experience of Hurricane Ian will have some impact on people. They'll say, oh yeah, we really have to think forward now because of climate change. This could happen here.
So Doug and Hank and Rick, what do you think? Do you think this would be controversial or a tough sell?
Hank, go ahead.
I think it needs to be done. I mean, I think it's very important. And I think we've got some legal precedents, I guess, from down on the South Shore. So that, I don't see where it's a taking that would stand up based on the precedents from down there.
Doug?
I just, I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around it in as far as getting, I guess, more familiarized with that zone, the AE zone. I'm not, the velocity zone I have no problem with at all, but the AE, I can't see so far back. I want to see a little closer of it. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
And I think that, again, this is something that's coming down the road and we're having to sort of manage it, right? And I think that, we've put a good amount of effort into it to consider it. And if it gets shot down by city council, then, we've done our work and they've done their work. And so again, I think we put our best foot forward. I agree with Hank's assessment that it needs to happen. Is it going to upset at least one person or two people? Probably. We've already had that discussion. The reality is in the V zone that most of those properties across the street from Atlantic, with that one example, which was sort of a joke, but won't be built on, right? for all the reasons that Greg cited, septic, just, all those types of things. So to sort of soften, Jane's concern that there's a lot of other mechanisms that, fall into this category. And frankly, for all the reasons, the right reasons.
Yeah,
right?
it's the right thing to do. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
And just, so you can just also be rest assured, Jane, since you're the chair of this subcommittee.
That it will all fall on me.
No,
I'm
no,
gonna
you will be
resign
named
from
in the first
Facebook.
lawsuit as well as me.
Sunny Robinson is here. Rick, would you mind if we just ask her if she has any comment?
And I just want to make one more comment.
Go ahead.
There are times when people say, you've created a plan and you put it on the shelf. And one of the slides that I will present public hearings, because I'm sure there'll be many, is this. We've put it in 4 plans now to do exactly what we're doing right now, starting back in 2015. So, and there was a point where it was discussed. It was greatly kind of reduced and focused on just the back shore, which we have the same condition in other locations. I mean, that was elevating things to a special permitting process. But subsequent documents, 66 people sitting in a room from every sector of the community represented. People said, you really need to look at this. Open space, same thing. It has an ability to, by restricting the development in these areas, these are areas that we're going to be needing in the future to absorb the wave energy of a rising sea. And then most recently in the Climate Action and Resilience Plan, and I have a slide that also calls out the language, everyone, to say, look at restricting development in the flood zones, great guidelines for areas. So, this is permeating through not just the planning board. You have kindred spirits on the Clean Energy Commission, the Open Space and Recreation Committee, and all those that were involved in some of the initial work in the MVP community building resilience process, as well as the risks that we identified back in 2015. So
That's a great point.
it certainly has the setup for it. Whether the community is at the point to take that step is what we'll find out in the public process that they've been engaged in for the last 7 years.
Yeah.
You want to permit, or go ahead, Jane.
And I just want to add that there is a different kind of incentive here than there was in our last set. And that is the price of private for flood insurance is going to become a real disincentive for people to put valuable improvements on land that is flood prone. It's not like a duplex in the R40. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's a really different level of risk. And I think that is just simply going to be a real incentive to pass something like this.
Do we want to permit Sunny Robinson to speak?
Yep.
Hi, Sunny. I don't even know if you have a comment, but we'd love to hear from you if you do. Maybe you're muted. No, you're not muted.
Okay.
Well, if she comes back in the next 22 minutes, we can talk. So Jane, from your perspective, that was sort of the meat of the subcommittee's work.
Yes, the other documents are really simple. One is when you make an application, you fill out a checklist, and that's no big deal. The other is no subdivision roads in the floodplain overlay district. That just makes a ton of sense. And then the other was just making people look at FEMA flood zone maps as part of their process in special permits and so on. It's really, unless anyone else in the subcommittee has a comment about that, it's really very straightforward.
I don't. Any other comments in conclusion, Greg?
I just would offer Anne an opportunity. She's really been our our workhorse through this, and it's really sticking through this with us for quite a bit of time. And I really appreciate all that she's done. And she's got to observe many communities kind of taking these kind of steps. So I just thought I'd give you a chance if you wanted to say anything more.
Well, I will say it's been my pleasure. I think the one thing I'd say, I agree that you've got one item that is likely controversial, and the others, while not controversial, I think will be very important in that basically every permitting process will need to look at the future maps, think about those, talk about those. The city will have the ability to condition based on it. I think they did pass similar language in Winthrop without difficulty, but I wouldn't take the lack of hopefully controversy to mean they're unimportant. I think they could really make a big difference in Gloucester, and I think they'll be a good step forward.
Any other comments before an adjournment?
No, well, what do we do next? Do we recommend that it goes to city council? No?
If you're prepared to do that, there's only 2 documents that you need to do that with, which would be, and I would change the date to reflect October 20th so that we have kind of a clean set. And that would be to recommend to the city council the adoption of the floodplain overlay district drafted dated October 20th, 2022, as well as the complementary amendments throughout the zoning ordinance in section 1 and section 5.8 of the zoning ordinance in the document titled zoning regulations dated October 20th, 20. So those 2 pieces will go forward, and I'll clean up the language for the council.
I'll leave it up to Jane to make the motion. It's her committee.
Is everybody ready for that? Yes, I'm ready to make a motion for those 2 documents. The ones that Greg mentioned with long titles and dates on them.
I'll second Jane's motion.
Just Greg, procedurally, is it intended that the planning board has a public hearing to receive the?
Yes,
documents?
so I would draft the report of the planning board initiating these as zoning amendments. That's forwarded to the city council. They'll immediately refer it to the planning board and the planning and development standing committee. And at this point, we should talk about future dates, but we would schedule a public hearing within 65 days of that initiation.
Okay. So I was just concerned that we were missing a step from subcommittee to planning board to city council back to planning board.
Nope.
Okay, fair enough.
Subcommittee's done their work, and now it's in your court, and then it will go up to council and then back for the public hearing.
So I'm gonna make a better motion.
Okay. So do we
What's-
need to vote on the bad motion?
Wait, hang on one second.
Or we can amend the motion?
Amend the motion, yes.
Okay. So the 2 documents that you're talking about, Greg, are the zoning regulations dated 6/16/22 and the floodplain overlay district currently dated 9/27/22. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I move that we recommend the zoning regulations currently dated 6/16/22 and the floodplain overlay district draft dated 9/27/22 with the updated dates that Greg will provide. And that we forward these to city council for a recommendation for what? For their
To
review,
amend the zoning ordinance.
to amend the zoning ordinances.
I'll second Jane's motion.
Okay, we
Or
have,
is
Point
it
of
just a
order,
motion
does
to
that-
amend? Is it a motion to amend? Or?
Yeah, I mean, do we have to amend the original one? Well, we didn't vote on the original one, did we?
No, we didn't vote on it.
we had a motion and a second, so.
Well, so now is this stand as an amended to the first and then just Hank accepting it now
Yeah.
becomes the amended version?
That's fine with me.
I think that's just a procedural matter.
Yes. So on the amended motion with a second, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Okay. Member Noonan,
Yes.
Member McCarl,
Yes,
Member Bookin,
Yes,
Member Cook,
Yes,
Member Henry,
Yes.
Member Rem.
Yes.
Okay,
And then I would also like to move, I think, right, Greg, that we adopt the subdivision rules and regs and the Gloucester floodplain overlay district checklist. And that's just planning board to adopt. Is that right?
yeah, I don't think we actually have to adopt the checklist because that's going to be administrative.
Okay,
But we'll certainly put it in the context of the discussion around all these pieces, but we'll make it clear what's a part of the zoning amendment process. But if you want to make a motion to amend the subdivision rules and regulations based on the language in the draft dated 6/16/2022.
2022. Yeah, so I move that we adopt the language in the subdivision rules and regs draft dated 6/16/2022.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Member Noonan,
Yes.
Member McCarl,
Yes,
Member Bookin,
yes,
Member Cook,
Doug.
yes,
Member Henry,
Yes.
Member Remsen.
Yes, thank you.
And that will actually require just a planning board public hearing and has noticing requirements. So the last piece I wanted to talk about was future meeting dates, just because we do have a couple of new public hearings coming forward, new applications. And I just want to try to make sure that I have as many folks that are going to be available for those meetings. So we won't have a meeting on November 3rd. We will have a meeting on November 17th, and I think, Jane, you mentioned that you will have a conflict with that one.
I
Does
do.
anyone else have a conflict with November 17th?
we're not having one on the 3rd.
No meeting on the 3rd.
Thank you. Okay, I can come the 17th. I have no problem.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, so 17th might be 5 members. How about December 1st?
I'll be out.
Who was
Sorry,
that? I'm sorry, my head was down. That's you?
me.
Jane?
Yeah,
Okay,
I sent you an email
yeah, I saw
a
the one
short
for the
time ago,
17th.
just giving you
but
my
I-
dates.
Okay.
No, like half an hour
Okay.
ago.
Okay, oh, okay. And how about the 15th?
I will be here on the 15th.
So everybody will be here on the 15th.
Yep.
All right, so I think if things go, I will probably try to schedule the public hearing on what we've discussed this evening on the 15th as an opener. And I will consult with a couple of applicants on whether or not it's certainly within 65 days, but if they want to wait just because special permitted uses need 5 out of 7 votes, and they might want many people to participate as they can.
So is David out for the time being?
I think he may be returning in December.
Okay.
Right.
So that would be good timing for a lot of things to kind of pick back up.
Anything else,
And I
Greg?
will also coordinate with the subcommittee over the next couple of weeks in advance of the meeting on the 17th.
you need a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman?
That'd be great.
I'll be happy to make such a motion at this time.
Thank you. We need a second.
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
All right, we'll give it to Doug.
Nice.
Roll call vote.
Member Noonan,
Yes.
Member Bookin,
Yes,
Member Cook,
Yes.
Member Henry,
Yes.
Member Remsen,
Yes.
Member McCarl.
Yes.
I went out of order, my usual.
All
Hey
right. no
Greg,
problem.
will you keep me posted on when this stuff is going to various meetings?
Yes.
At city council and P and D and all that?
Yeah, it'll probably, you'll see it before it really goes anywhere,
Okay.
because it'll be immediately referred back out.
Great, thank you.
And
Okay.
thank you, Catherine. Great minutes.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yes,
Thanks,
thanks,
everyone.
Catherine.
And
Right.
thank you,
And I
thank
think
you
Ann
for
already
the-
jumped off. She may have already
Yeah.
jumped off, but she's been a great part of this.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
All right. Have a good night.
Good night, folks.
Bye.